You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another dejected episode of the Assembly Call, as today your Indiana Hoosiers fall 84-83 to the Northwestern Wildcats at home in a game that certainly didn't feel that close, as Northwestern came out and controlled the game from the tip, stayed in control pretty much the entire game thereafter. A late flurry of shot making and fouls, and a little bit more of a sense of urgency on defense made this the final score closer than the game actually felt. But the end result for Indiana is just a disastrous loss. Coming off the loss at Iowa City, coming back home, look, you're down Xavier Johnson, you're down Race Thompson, and I think everybody understands that the expectations are a little bit different, but the expectations are still more than this, because this was a game where, strategically, Indiana seemed to be a step or two behind the entire game. And just in terms of fight and getting to loose balls and doing the little things that it takes to win a Big Ten basketball game, no matter who is on the court, Indiana was a step or two behind the Wildcats today. And so the end result is another loss. Indiana falls to 10-5 on the season, 1-3 in conference play, and we are here to break it all down for you. I'm Jared Morris. We got a full crew today. The coach is here, Brian Tonsoni, Ryan Phillips, Andy Bottoms, all here to talk about just a splendid day of basketball for Indiana. Let's start the way we start every show. That is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. My banner moment today, I'm going back to the second half when it was 53-41. Trace Jackson Davis goes for a block, falls on his back. You could hear every Indiana fan in the world hold their breath until he got back up, and he did. And thank goodness he did, because Trace Jackson Davis played 40 minutes today, and really for me was the one guy who brought it from the tip all the way until the end. He finishes with 18 points, 24 rebounds, 8 assists, 4 blocks. It was not an efficient game for Trace. From an offensive standpoint, he was 8 for 19, struggled against some double teams. It was far from a perfect performance, but he was the one guy that from the tip really seemed to be fighting. And, Jalen Hood-Schifino finishes with 33 points. Jalen was a tremendous shot maker today. I mean, just incredible shooting, but 6 turnovers, some really lackadaisical defense from him that, really you kind of saw throughout the roster. But I thought Trace, given what we know that he's dealing with physically and the burden that he had to shoulder, really stepped up for this Indiana team today. And unfortunately, not enough of his teammates did, and the result is a loss that really just at this point in the season, given what this team is facing, is unconscionable. But credit to Northwestern, they came out and played with poise and played with more fight than Indiana, and that's why they walk away today with a victory. All right, guys, let's talk about our presenting sponsor.
Home Field Apparel, wear one for the team.
Yep, our banner moment today, as always, brought to you by our friends at Home Field Apparel, now in their 6th season of sponsoring the Assembly Call, and their 2nd as the presenting sponsor for the Back Home Network. And as you know, Home Field has the largest collection of vintage IU apparel that you will find anywhere, and they've got a lot more stuff coming out soon. I don't know the exact date of when it'll come out, but you've probably heard on our show, on Crimson Cast, Chronic Hoosiers been tweeting about it. They sent us all a little sneak peek of some new IU gear that's coming, and it's awesome. There's a women's basketball shirt coming. That's the one that I ordered. So keep an eye out for that, because the biggest collection of IU apparel is getting bigger. Coach Tonsoni, my apologies to your closet and bank account. We know you'll be getting many of those items. But look, Home Field Apparel, just such a good company to support. They employ a lot of people in Indianapolis. They came up through the Kelley School of Business. And the thing I love the most about them is they show such great respect for the schools that they work with. And they bring these old logos, out that haven't been used. They bring them back. They breathe new life into them and really gives you something unique and interesting to wear to show your support for your team through the ups and the downs. So go to homefieldapparel.com. Use our promo code HOME, HOME, to get 15% off your first order. That's promo code HOME for 15% off. Again, the website, homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. All right, well, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. And we will start with Coach. It is Tonsoni time. What is on your mind after this latest Indiana loss?
Well, home field apparel is fundamentally strong, unlike our Indiana Hoosiers. So, make sure you go to homefieldapparel.com to buy some fundamentally good college apparel. Now, obviously, when you're down 2 starters, you're behind the 8 ball, not making any excuses whatsoever. Indiana needed to play better. With those starters, without those starters. I think the talent level, even without those 2, was somewhat even, if not in Indiana's advantage, when you have Jalen Hood-Schifino and Trace Jackson-Davis. But this team lacks fundamentals. It doesn't close out well. It doesn't block out well. It doesn't pass. Too many one-handed passes, lazy passes, turnovers. And that's got to fall on the coaching staff to make sure that good habits are drilled into your players so that next man up can happen. I'm of the belief that a Coach Woodson-run team needs talent. He likes to rely on his players to call things and to run things and to make shots as opposed to trying to, joystick a team. And so when you have 2 players off, I think Coach Woodson's behind the 8 ball as well because he's used to guys just stepping up and making plays in the NBA kind of way. So for Coach Woodson to be successful, he's got to recruit better. He's got to hit that transfer portal. He's got to do those things, and he's got to rely on having the right amount of talent. And right now, when you bring in young guys or backup guys, they're going to have some struggles, and we gotta live through those. C.J. Gunn had a little sloppy catch, but C.J. Gunn needs to play. This is kind of it's not acceptable, but I think we're going to see a lot more of this as the season goes on because the roster is just not where it needs to be for a Coach Woodson-led program of what he wants to do with his program, in my opinion. And so Indiana's got to have to claw and fight, and they almost did, but they didn't. And I'm trying to get mentally prepared to see a lot of this down the stretch.
Andy, your bottom's line on this Indiana performance.
Yeah, this is one where it feels like you got to kind of rein yourself in from thinking the absolute worst of everything, which I am probably the look on my face shows I'm attempting to do. But I mean, my synopsis of this game is a team showed up that really needed a win looking wildly unprepared and unmotivated at the beginning of the game, and they never recovered. They got close by the end of the game. There were stretches of play that were good, but every time they really needed to bow up and do something, they gave up an easy basket, or they got out hustled to a loose ball, or they didn't come up with a rebound. And ultimately, that's what it is. And part of that is on the players, and part of that is on the coaching staff. Starting the same lineup to start the second half that dug you a hole at the beginning of the game is unconscionable to me, based on what you saw. You finally saw them go small late in the game, and TJD had more room to operate. Now, maybe that's because Northwestern is trying to protect the three-point line and not give up threes and that give you some momentum at the end of the game. But when Kopp was at the 4, or even in like CJ Gunn was at the 4 at one point, I think, or Galloway, you can take your pick of who it was. The amount of room in the middle of the floor was vastly different. I thought the zone was an interesting wrinkle, so I'm not going to say, hey, you made no adjustments in the game. I thought it was odd the way they used it and kind of sprinkled it in at times instead of really sticking with it for multiple possessions in a row, but it did throw Northwestern off at times. But the reality was you had 2 guys that showed up, scored the majority of the points. One of them, to your point, I thought had a lot of moments where they were really lackadaisical. I think that was the perfect word, despite scoring a lot of points. And it was a lot the story of Iowa in that case. You had, those 2 guys. Somebody else needed to be able to step up. Somebody else needed to be put in a position to step up. And that was really a struggle. Even if you look at the guys who ended up with points at the end, Galloway ends up with 8 points. Part of that's on a banked in, 3 at the horn. Scoop scored 4 points late in the game to get up to 8. But for the majority of the game, you didn't have anybody else besides those 2 guys that scored more than 5 points. And I get being down starters, but just getting completely worked in the first part of the game was probably what was the biggest struggle for me. And then you're spending your whole game, the whole rest of the game, trying to fight uphill. And I thought there were opportunities that they missed. We'll probably talk about one of those in the meaningful moments where they're at the free throw line with the front end with a chance to cut it to 6, and you blink your eyes and it's 12. This just not a team, as Coach said, that's just fundamentally strong right now. And for all that everybody wants to say, this team going to hang its hat on defense and all the stuff that was there, this team was terrible defensively. even after the game, Northwestern is ranked 161st in KenPom. That's after this game, where IU gave up 1.2 points per possession. I mean, you hung 83 on a team that's a top 10 team in defensive efficiency, but you gave up easy basket after easy basket on turnovers, on lackadaisical play, on miscommunication, whatever else. So you get what you deserve in a scenario like that, and that is a loss.
Yikes. Well, Ryan, what's left to rant about?
Sorry, did I step on you a little bit?
Feels like it's the third rant of the day right here. Look, I'm going to go more macro with this than just this game. Let's just say what we all know from having seen this team over the last 6 weeks. They're not a well-coached team. They are ill-prepared for everything. I mean, they didn't know anything Northwestern was going to be running, and Northwestern has run the same stuff all year. They had no counter. They just, and then again, as Andy said, I think the most galling thing was to start the same starting five. Like Jordan Geronimo, God love him. He's trying. He's just not a great basketball player right now. Was he like minus 16 today or something? And you put him back out there to start again. And it was clearly whatever matchup they had to start the game didn't work. Northwestern just wiped the floor with them. And again, think about that sentence. Northwestern wiped the floor with them. And I mean, that's just the state of the program right now. I know, and I saw people say, well, Northwestern's won some good. I don't care. You're at home against Northwestern with a decided talent advantage, and you can't beat them. Coming off a game where you went to Iowa, and you should have beaten them because they were at their low point of the year, and you gave them life. You go up 21, and then you give them life. This is back-to-back games where this team just doesn't follow through. And I'm not blaming the players anymore. I'm sorry. This continually happens. It happened last year. They step on the floor and they are ill prepared to play basketball. And then when a team counters them, there's no counter back. They keep running the same stuff and banging their heads on the wall. Today they went zone for a little bit, and I was like, you know what? With how bad the defense is, try anything. And then they kept going out of it. And it's like Northwestern was struggling against it, yet they kept pulling out of it and changing it. And you know what? I just feel like there's no direction to the team or the program. I feel like offensively, you guys are talking about how, it was Jalen Hood-Schifino and Trace Jackson-Davis and nobody else. Name one time they ran a play to get anybody else open. It's basically give the ball to Jalen Hood-Schifino. They'll do the dribble handoff. Trace will set a screen for him, and then one of those two will finish the play. When was the last time they ran a set to get Miller Kopp an open shot? Miller Kopp's hitting 44% of his threes. When's the last time they ran anything to get him an open look? When's the last time they got an ISO for Tamar Bates out of the offense that wasn't Tamar Bates just getting a pass and just driving? That guy can add points to the roster quickly. You see it to the ledger quickly. You saw it today. You've seen it in the past. And they're just standing around while these other two guys do stuff. Like, those players need to be involved. You recruited them for a reason. They're talented and they can do stuff. They can help Indiana and they can take pressure off those other two guys. And there's nothing given to get those guys looks, to get them involved. They have to go find it themselves. And that is not how college basketball works. That's an NBA mindset of, well, if he's talented, he'll go get his shot. That's not what works with 18 to 20-year-old kids in college basketball unless they're a superstar. And you're not going to have 5 superstars on your roster. So this team is poorly coached, and it needs to get better, and Mike Woodson needs to figure this out because it's rapidly going downhill. I mean, I get they've got injuries. I get that the Big Ten's tough. But you know what? Other teams have injuries. They figure it out. You're still 10 times more talented than Northwestern, and you turned in that performance. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm out on this right now. They need to figure something out and figure it out fast. And there needs to be some sense of urgency from this program that I don't see right now.
I was going to talk about Jalen Hood-Schifino here because for what he didn't bring to the game in terms of defensive intensity at times and some of the lackadaisical turnovers, that was one of the most scintillating shooting and scoring performances we've seen. And he deserves a lot of credit for that. I mean, that was just a tremendous offensive performance that Indiana needed. However, I think we need to quickly veer to the right because I just saw a tweet that has me very concerned. Mike Woodson on defensive struggles, and I see this tweeted from several people. Xavier Johnson and Race Thompson are sitting on the sideline. That's why we're struggling. Now, maybe that quote needs more context, and so I'm going to allow some space for that. But I do have a problem with that sentiment Because, look, I think we all recognize that the hopes of, an elite top 10 defense, which we talked about in the offseason and which seemed reasonable after what we saw last year, that's not possible without Xavier Johnson and Race Thompson. They're not going to be as good defensively. Fine. But there is no excuse for the type of defense Indiana played today. It's not just missing those guys. It's that collectively the defensive will that we saw last year and that we saw in the North Carolina game, that's not there. You can still play with fight and focus, coach, even if Race and Xavier aren't there. And so for that message to be coming down from the head coach, it almost seems to excuse what we saw, and that's kind of how they played. So if that's the message, that has me really concerned because Race isn't coming back for, 3 or 4 weeks probably is kind of the hope. X, maybe he comes back. But is that our philosophy for how we turn the defense back around, is just waiting for those guys? Because that's what it looked like today, honestly. So the way we played kind of makes a little bit of sense if that's the message and the tone that's coming from the top. That's, again, I want to wait and see the full quote, but even just seeing that, I don't know, man. That's not the kind of leadership I think that's going to help this team play the kind of defense they need to win games in the Big Ten, which is extremely hard, even at full strength, is going to be even harder without those two guys, but it's not impossible. You had 4 top 35 recruits on the court at one time for a lot of this game today, But they didn't play with the kind of grit and will that you need, and that's why Northwestern was better defensively, got to the loose balls. Boy, I got a problem with that.
You got to be careful as a coach and what you say in the media, and after you lose, it's always tough. Sometimes you say things that you don't really think through, but are you surprised? Because when the offense is bad, it's just because kids aren't making shots. There's something embedded in that if you really want to look deep. It's not Coach Woodson's offense. It's not Coach Woodson's defense. It's the players. The players aren't making shots. That's why Coach offense isn't working. The players are injured. That's why Coach Woodson's defense is not doing that. It's the third-person stuff coming out. That I want to be careful here because I want to be supportive. But people who talk like that and think like that generally sometimes have trouble. I think you either texted it in our chat or maybe even tweeted it, or I saw it somewhere, but something happened at the end of November, December, where this team has not had the juice. So it's not injuries. Injuries play a big part because defensively we're going to be worse without those two. That's honest. Those two are really good defenders, but it's your job as players and it's your job as a coach to go out and compete while they're injured. You can't just sit there and say, well, we're just going to roll out the ball and try to play defense because wait till those guys get back. That's a defeatist attitude. That's just not good. But I think this is more besides all of the glamour of bringing an Indiana guy back and Mike Woodson back for the year and a half, he's had some of these comments like in his press conferences. Some of it is I just think he just goes to the short answers. That's just who Mike is. He doesn't like to get into long discussions like a lot of coaches do, and every coach gives coach speak. So I just think, he gave that short answer, which is a true answer. Our defensive struggles start, and it does start with those two guys missing, but I don't like that either if the context doesn't come out that it was within something different. Because you got 8, 9, 10, 15 games, whatever left. Find a defense that works. Changed, and to his credit, the zone was a good adjustment. I thought it helped. So he did that. It's a good job that he did that. Now, I think it was a little late in the second half. I think he could have gone sooner. And I said that Friday in the Banner Friday. He's making adjustments. It's just 4 or 5 minutes late. And then Ryan said it. He goes away from some of those things that work.
Trust
work
your
well.
adjustments.
So he's got a playbook. He understands the game. He's just got to have a feel for the college game is missing, in my opinion. But you can't just blame players for shooting, and you can't just blame guys for being out. You got to find a way to compete. And the guys didn't compete defensively, and they didn't take care of the basketball, and that's on the program. And you're the head honcho.
Yeah.
So
no, I'll say this: when Tom Crean said, "Well, you got to make shots," we made fun of him. When Archie Miller said, "You got to make shots," we made fun of him. And when Mike Woodson saying the same thing, you got to treat it the same way. There's way more to it than that, and there's a way to, as we said, run things for guys, get guys open, put guys in good. If one of your players is getting beat like a drum defensively, take him the hell out of the game and adjust what you're doing defensively. The zone, I quite frankly think they should have started the second half in the zone. Like they really should have, just to see what Northwestern did. But I don't understand a lot of the decisions. I don't understand a lot of the lineup choices. I don't understand what they're doing behind the scenes. I don't understand a lot of stuff, and I don't know what the coaching staff is really doing other than maybe than changing things up. As coach said, 5 minutes late. I know they go to a lot of games with Montverde guys playing in it. That's about all I can tell discernibly that they all do. And I'm all for that. Go recruit the hell out of those guys. But like, what are we doing on the court to change things up and make things better? It's looked the exact same since Kansas.
Ryan, help me with this because I don't like the offense at all, but we have the 21st most efficient offense according to Ken Palm. What are we seeing that those numbers don't support, right?
Well, Jalen and Trace are making a ton of individual plays.
I think the individual plays is one. I think the other thing is we're in a lot of high-scoring games. So opposing team, I mean, no matter, it's very rare in college basketball that like two decent teams or Power 5 teams, one scores 80 and one scores 50. Like, it's because you get loose when you start scoring a lot of points. And so I think that's lifting Indiana a lot. And I think you have a guy like Trace Jackson Davis who can score 30 points. It makes it easier to get some baskets. But yeah, I think that's what it is. I just
struggle with myself sometimes not liking the offense and then going and looking. And last year we were 95th and now we're 21st. You would think that's great improvement, right?
They're certainly hitting more threes. They're certainly hitting a higher percentage of threes. I think that's a big thing, and it's a huge bonus. But at the same time, like, it feels like they're scoring a lot of those points when they're down 10, 15 points and coming back, and they get
That's the trouble with stats.
And then it pulls apart, and then they get it close, but there's no time left to get over the hump. Like today, they're down 4 at the end, and the game's over, but Trey Galloway bombs in a half quarter. That was just a microcosm for me the entire season. It's a get down 15, and then you crawl and scratch and get back, and then they stretch it back out to 12 again, and then it's 2 minutes left and you score 6 straight points to make it look closer than it was. That's how it's felt this year.
Andy, you want the last word on this?
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to the defense a little bit. Much to my chagrin, I think a couple things that you see, and I think you saw this even when they played zone. The amount of times where guys get crossed up and there's miscommunication, and you got somebody pointing here and there. There was a play where I think earlier the second half, Northwestern ends up with maybe it was the first half. Northwestern runs a screen, Bates and Kopp get hung up. They both stay with the same guy. Guy flares to the wing. It's a wide open three. The amount of miscommunication on screens and things like that you continue to see with this team is really alarming. And I even mentioned it, I think when I talked about being at the Elon game, assistants were up yelling at guys about screens and communicating on those. Like, that continues to be a problem. And that was a problem sometimes in the zone. There were a couple cases where they gave up open looks because the guy on the baseline is rotating up too far and can't get back to where he needs to be because they're not sure when to switch off that. Now, I don't know how much they've actually even practiced zone. There was even a play where Kopp started in the corner and ended up being one of the guys on the top, and Gunn had to go cover, one of the baseline spots for him. So I don't know if that was done on the fly, in which case maybe some of that stuff is more notable. But this team, if they can't contain the dribble any better than they did today, I think we're going to see more zone from this team. So it's one thing I'd look at to see, can they get better at communicating in those scenarios and passing people off as they move from one area to the other? Because I think even today, they didn't get burned by that. They got burned by other things at times, but the zone was a little bit effective, and I'm sure caught Northwestern off guard because it wasn't something that IU had done at all. But if they want to play it more, and I think it has to be viewed as a viable option for this team because they can't contain people off the dribble with any consistency. They need to get better at that piece because communication is equally important there, and that's an area where they've proven to struggle in a man-to-man defense as well.
Yeah, one thing to note is, and give Northwestern credit because they got whatever they wanted offensively. Coach can back me up on this. They weren't doing anything complicated. It was usually a screen and roll, or a guy would get switched on to somebody he was better than and just straight line drive him to the basket, and or jump stop, move around. Everybody would help, and you get somebody open. Like, it was so basic and simple. And look, Northwestern is very fundamental and well schooled in that way, so they weren't hurting themselves. But Indiana just couldn't stop simple things. They could get to the basket. Northwestern was either getting a layup or a wide open three on pretty much every possession. It was just a matter of whether or not they made the shot. And nothing changed. And as you said, Jared, they had 4 top 35 recruits on the floor together for long stretches of that game, and you're that much better than them. how do you let that happen? How are you not just like out athleting them at that point? Like, I know that's not how basketball works, but at some point, on some possession, you have to just be a better player than them and stop them. And it didn't happen all day. It did not happen all day. I mean, even Trace, and I know he's playing with a back injury. There were times where Trace would just get way over help on someone. There's a guy behind him for a dunk, or he gets beat down the floor and there's a dunk. And it's just a general lack of focus and effort. That's all it is defensively.
That's going back to the communication piece. The first time they played zone, there's a possession next, and no one knew if they were in zone or man. Half the guys were in man and half were in zone. So that goes to your communication piece right there. And sometimes that happens, but again, good teams don't have that. Someone on the floor takes leadership, or the coaches are communicating that you're staying in whatever the call, whatever that call is. And Northwestern runs stuff, and they're fundamental. I mean, I'm just going to go back to saying that Coach Collins has struggled, other than the 1 year he went to the tournament. But they are fundamental, whether it was simple and non-complex stuff, handoffs and ball screens, and then getting the right matchups. That's what college coaches do, to take advantage of stuff. And 6 turnovers speaks to the fundamental play of a team that's not talented. And Ryan, we did out-talent them. That's why it was only a 1-point loss.
Yeah,
that's why it was only 1. It probably should have been 15-20. The way, the fundamentals, the defense, the blocks, the steals, and Northwestern is one of the best teams in getting steals and getting blocks. So kudos again to Northwestern. They played really, really well. But the reason it was 1 is because we have better talent, even with the 2 guys being absent, and that's ultimately the frustration.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had, the 2 best players on the floor, Jalen Hood-Schifino and Trace Jackson Davis, and we lost. You should win games when you have the 2 best players on the floor, but all those other reasons. Northwestern, they're essentially using the formula that Indiana wanted, which is play really good defense, have a couple of really good experienced guards, and play tough, and let's go win. And they did, and we didn't. So, as we continue our breakdown of Indiana's 1-point loss to Northwestern, we'll point out today's meaningful moments you might have missed, and then we'll go inside the numbers to highlight the most important statistical notes from the game. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
This is Anthony Leo. What's the only thing better than being a hometown Hoosier? Having a friendly place to hang out online after IU games, no matter where in the world you may be. So join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach right here after every IU basketball game.
All right, thank you, Anthony. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris, here with a full roster. Coach Brian Tonsoni, Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips, all here with me breaking down Indiana's loss to Northwestern. And it is time now for...
Meaningful moments that you might have missed.
Yes, meaningful moments you might have missed, brought to you by our friends at Hoosier Ticket Project, where they help individuals and families experience IU athletic events in person for the first time through the generosity of alumni and fans. To learn more about how you can donate money or extra tickets to help create meaningful moments for other IU fans, visit HoosierTicketProject.org. That's HoosierTicketProject.org. So I definitely think this is going to be a space to talk about C.J. Gunn, because I think he had a terrific, meaningful moment providing a spark for Indiana in the first half. But Andy, as I kind of look through my list here of moments that I have, a lot of them are just examples of lackadaisical defense. One, for example, Jalen Hood-Schifino, who, again, was scintillating offensively. Just a terrific offensive game from him. But, the one image I can't get out of my head is he drove. This is back in the first half. He drove, he got stripped, he ended up falling to the ground. And it was a good 5, 6, 7 seconds before he ever got back into the frame to get back into play transition. And it ended up leading to a 3 for Northwestern as they had a 5-on-4. There was another play late in the second half where it was either a free throw or a long 3, and Northwestern missed it, and the ball must have bounced between 3 Indiana players who just weren't ready to get it. Northwestern got it, gained a valuable possession. And then you recall late in the game, Andy, several front ends of 1-and-1. Scoop missed one, Jalen Hood-Schifino missed one, and in a game that ends up being a one-possession game, those little things create the margin. If any one of those things goes differently, But again, this was a game where Indiana, they allowed Northwestern to just get an abnormal amount of 50-50 opportunities. And the only thing that you can attribute that to is just a lack of focus and fight. And Indiana had it in spurts, but they didn't have enough of it today. And so, to me, there are so many meaningful moments that stick out of a team that just wasn't ready for the little moments that happen throughout a game that actually end up leading to winning and losing. Because you shoot 9 of 18 from three-point range, and you get 11 offensive rebounds. You have two guys have the kind of day that Trace and Jalen had. You should win the game, but you didn't because so many of those little things added up across the day for Indiana.
Yeah, there's a number of times I wrote down in the notes that I took about just getting out hustled to a play, to a loose ball here or there. But I think the biggest one is the front end of that, the 1-on-1 that was missed. I think that came right after Galloway had played great defense. That was really the same possession. Ends up diving on the floor, gets a timeout. It's an 8-point game at that point. It's one of those where it's like you needed the timeout to retain possession, but you almost wish that the game would have just kept going because you get a little bit of time. Everybody relaxes a little bit, and then you get back in, and they didn't really play well in that stretch, but they end up, Bates gets fouled, chance to go down 6 if you make both, and he missed the front end, which happens, but certainly unfortunate timing as you go through with that, and then the subsequent plays after that, the inability to really say, okay, hey, we're going to get another chance. You'll give up a straight line drive for a layup after that. We settle for a mid-range jump shot early in the shot clock after that. Then Northwestern runs the clock down. We bail them out with a foul at the end. Make a turnover, renew fouls again, and then it's a 12-point game at that point. Like nothing just happened. And you missed the front end of a 1-and-1 and got one shot, turned the ball over once, and you gave up scores on 3 straight possessions. You can argue with some of the foul calls. You can argue with how the game was officiated, but that was a stretch where you had a chance to really put game pressure on them with a meaningful amount of time left in the game. The problem was that the game pressure, by the time IU got close enough at the end, it really wasn't. There was a little bit of pressure on them, but not that much. At that point, there's still, 6 minutes in the game. If you're really able to get it to that point, you've got the momentum and things like that. I just thought that was a huge swing in that stretch. But there were any number of other times during the game, as you mentioned, when IU's got a chance to make a play and they didn't come up with a loose ball, and Northwestern more often than not converted that by either getting fouled or getting another open shot, things like that. But that was the biggest stretch to me was, a huge swing to go from chance to go down 6 to going down 12 or 13 like that.
Yeah. Coach, I mentioned CJ Gunn, Northwestern gets out to a 34-17 lead, and things really felt dead. The arena was dead. There was just so little energy. Really, again, outside of Trace, who I thought, brought it and was rebounding as tough as he's rebounded all season long, there was just no one bringing a whole lot of juice. And I thought CJ Gunn, once he got in the game, really kind of lit a fire under Indiana. Just, he hit that little pull-up jumper. No, I know he went 1 for 5, so he didn't make any of his other shots. But he had a hard drive into the basket, didn't avoid contact, probably should have gotten a foul called. And was like the only guy putting pressure on the ball, like serious, pressure on the ball. And so he ends up, leading to a boo-booey miss, which didn't happen a ton today. But that led to a 7-0 run. Trace had a couple of assists to Malik Renew and Miller Kopp in that stretch. And it took it to a 34-24 game and really gave Indiana some life. And that was nice to see. And we've seen that from CJ. And so he, right now, he ended up playing 15 minutes and didn't have as big an impact in the second half of the game. He's a guy who's probably best in short spurts. But once again, did what he needs to do, which is come in and be that energy guy off the bench. And I tip my cap to him because Indiana needed someone to do it in the first half. And CJ was able to do it. And it really seemed to spark Indiana and get them back within reach there in the first half.
Absolutely. I like CJ's game. It's in development, obviously. He's very handsy defensively. He's going to get called for some fouls, but he also gets a lot of deflections. And I think that he did bring that spark, and I was glad to see it. And I think, I've mentioned somewhere that this is now a developmental season more than it is, you want to win and you want to get to the tournament, but it also needs to be a developmental season to get ready for next year. And CJ Gunn is a big part of that. He's got to get enough run. He's got to get these 15 minutes to 20 minutes. And you're going to have to live with some sloppy handoffs. He had a little sloppy pass on the wing once that resulted in a turnover. You're going to have that from a freshman because you got to learn in game time. And he's going to get beat on a closeout. But the dude's got to play. He's athletic. He can leap. His shooting has not been what we think it should be yet, very low teens or whatever. But at this point, with 2 starters out, I don't think you question at all that he should get 15 to 20 minutes on a regular basis and probably should have played more in that second half, especially the way that same starting group came off to a tough start. Would have loved to seen small ball with a little CJ Gunn in there before the 640 mark or whenever Indiana did go small.
Yeah, with CJ, for me, I thought the things that stood out the most, one was his pressure on the ball, which stood out above what other people were doing, but also his willingness to attack on the defensive end. I know you referenced the play that he probably got fouled on through that, but I kind of felt like Northwestern really set the tone early. They're grabbing guys off cuts, they're bumping everybody, they're daring officials to call fouls. Standard Big Ten tackle basketball. They weren't going to do it, but he wasn't afraid to go in and try to make something happen. I just thought he was aggressive, and the mistakes he made were ones of being aggressive as opposed to unfocused or unwilling to really attack and do things like that. I thought the one inbounds play, he really had good elevation on that jump shot. Thought that was going to go in. Missed a 3 shortly thereafter, but I think a guy that you probably need to see a little bit more from, just because he is going to give up some straight line drives, but other guys are doing that and putting forth less effort on the ball. He at least was disruptive. And so I think some good minutes from him. I thought he was the spark that they needed in the first half, and was a little bit surprised he didn't, as Coach said. I think I marked down, and I could have marked this down wrong, so take that with a grain of salt. But it was 70-57, I think, when they switched and started playing small with Kopp at the 4. Now, we can argue they put on a little bit at the end of the game, but that tells me you outscored them by 12, and even if you take that 3 away at the end, you outscored them by 9 once you went small. And I don't think that's a coincidence, and I think that's something that we've seen the last couple of games. So not to go back and beat the drum on that again. So I won't. But.
Yeah, I mean, look, guys, this was a really big spot for Jordan Geronimo. He comes in, he gets a chance to start. Obviously, he has an athleticism advantage in this game. It's not, on the road. This should have been a game where he was able, and they don't have a guy like Chris Murray who just presents all these defensive challenges for him. This should have been a game where he was able to get something done, and in 10 minutes, he doesn't score and gets 2 rebounds. And I saw, Coach Woodson said, we've probably got to do something else to the starting lineup. I don't want to blame it on Jordan, but, we've got to get off to better starts. Maybe a thought that would have been helpful at the beginning of the second half. Unfortunately, Jordan is just really struggling, and we're all rooting as hard as possible for him. But right now he's just not giving Indiana any kind of production, and for him to not be able to produce in a game like this at home, I think is a really big red flag. As we move forward. I mean,
just real quick, Jared, he was minus 16 in 10 minutes. Like, it's just, the team's not good with him on the floor, whether that's his fault or not, whether it's the way he pairs with these other guys or whatever it is. The team just isn't good with him on the floor right now, especially for, with that starting group. Like, he's supposed to be sort of like Trey Galloway's best position is as energy off the bench and coming in and, scrapping after guys and, chase down blocks and all that. He's not a primary guy, and he probably never will be until he can hit threes consistently and handle the ball consistently. Because every time Jordan gets the ball and starts to dribble, you're just waiting for something bad to happen. And it's just a matter of learning those fundamentals and getting better at them. But I just think that having him on the floor and expecting starters minutes out of him is a fool's errand. And I thought it was a silly way to go today, quite frankly, with the decision.
Breaking news in the chat. Andy Bottoms has just informed us that Grace Berger is starting for the women today. Are you serious? That's awesome. Holy moly. Okay, so good news. Good basketball news for Indiana with Grace Berger.
Yeah, they put the graphic out with who the starters were, and she's on it. So I have no reason to believe they would mislead us.
All right.
Unless some intern really screwed up.
That's all right. You know what? We need hope. So even if she's not starting, just tell us that she is. Give us a brief respite of hope here. Go Hoosiers. Hopefully they can take care of Northwestern. Guys, let's talk about numbers. And as I look at the numbers, I mean, look, turnovers, 16 turnovers, and I think Northwestern, they turned almost every one of those turnovers into points, which really, was a huge part of this game. But Ryan, you mentioned something earlier. The 3-point shooting was a bonus, or it was nice. And it does kind of feel like that a little bit, because it feels like 3-point shooting is a bit of an afterthought for this team right now, which it shouldn't be. Indiana goes 9 of 18 from downtown today. They are now shooting 38.2% on the season. That is 21st in the country.
Yeah.
However, I'm not happy with that number. You know why? Because that number should be down, because Indiana should be taking more threes. Indiana, once again, took less than 30% of its shots from three. They are 305th in the country in three-point attempt rate. And for a team that's struggling to get anything going, and especially there, like the 3 or 4 minute mark, when we knew we had to get a three-pointer, do we not have anything we can run to free up a three-pointer, to get one for Kopp, to get one for Scoop? So seeing the 9
Look
of 18,
at most of those three-pointers today, Jared. They were Shifino making an individual play and taking a three-pointer.
Totally. And again, in a game where you lose by one, there's so many little things that add up to this. But this is a team now that has 3 guys in the starting lineup making over 40% of their threes at a reasonable volume. Guys taking, 3, 4, 5 threes a game. This is not a fluke, but it's not a big enough part of our offense. And I know we talked about it at the beginning of the season. Everybody's like, but we're winning anyway. Yeah, but you know what? You create habits. And the habit that was created is everything is focused inside, and I get it, because of Trace. But this team is demonstrating that the offense needs to be more heavily weighted outside the line. And it's just not. And to me, it's another big-time missed opportunity. Now, I'll give Northwestern some credit, because I thought they defended Indiana on the perimeter really well, and they're a really good defensive team. But, when you're looking for answers and your defense is struggling, so you have to increase the offensive volume, the three-point shooting has to become a bigger feature of this team. And so I look at that, and I look at the 9 of 18, and I'm excited, but I'm frustrated because that number needs to be up higher. And you've got to find ways. If it's not coming out of the normal flow of your offense, run some plays to take some pressure off of your injured big man who played 40 minutes to free up guys who are proving they can make shots. I don't know what is so hard about this.
Jared, I have rarely seen a team that's easier to close out on than Indiana. And the reason they're easier to close out on is because guys aren't that far from the open shooter. And it takes 2 steps to get in face. That's why Miller Kopp wants to shoot. He's out there. You can see he's ready. He'll catch the ball, and a guy will be on him immediately. And, yeah, sometimes you do have to force it with a guy on you. I think that's, something you should do. But a good offensive player knows, hey, if I don't have the shot, let's move it and get me another one, get me another look or something like that. And he's just not getting those opportunities. Miller Kopp shooting 44%. And when was the last time we saw him with a wide open look that came out of the offense as opposed to a scramble situation or a kick out when a defender overhelped? Like he's not getting those looks. Why? You have him on the floor to be a 3-point shooter and a leader and all that, but his main skill is to hit threes, and you have him out there to do that, and all you have him doing in the offense is standing on the wing waiting for somebody to find him. That's it. There's no movement. There's no.
That's just the design of the offense.
It is, and it's
drive and kick or throw it in the post. If it's single coverage, then TJD gets to play one-on-one. If it's double team, then you kick it out for a catch and shoot three. That's the design of the offense. That's Coach
terrible.
Woodson's offense.
And that's the thing, Coach. And we both know this. Just because it's drive and kick or it's toss in and kick out, you can still do stuff on the perimeter to get guys better looks, get guys better angles. And they're not. They stand around. And you're right. That's the design of the offense. But guess what? When that ball goes into Trace Jackson-Davis, you can have a backside wing guy cut through. You can have your other guy cut across the face of that post up. Hope that maybe his man stays to try and double, and then you have a guy open on the perimeter for wide open.
Ryan, I don't watch the league very much, but I don't think they run much for shooters. It's all individual play, or it's drive and kick and post feed. And then shoot over someone because you can elevate over someone. They don't run a stagger double or anything like that.
The league runs concepts. So the offense will be a concept, and you just run out of that. You're basically on your own. And unless you need a basket badly, you've got a set play you run. And
that's what we do here at Indiana.
Yep.
That's just what it is. And we either got to embrace it or sit on here and bitch about it all the time. And I'm
picking option B.
Be easier to embrace it if you beat Northwestern at home with it. I mean,
if you still got to take care of the basketball. The pros take care of the basketball. The good pros.
Guess what? The pros are better. I mean, because they're pros.
Talented.
They're better, and they can make shots that are contested. They can get to a spot to get a pull-up, get to a spot to get to the rim. Like, you're never going to have that much talent on a team in college basketball. And so relying on a professional offense with guys who aren't professionals is silly. And look, plenty of other NBA guys have come down to college and done the same exact thing. This is not unique to Mike Woodson. And virtually every time it has failed because you're used to having one type of player and you come down here and you expect the same out of a different type of player, and you're not going to get it. The thing is, NBA guys, for the most part, are very well-rounded and can kind of do everything. If you got a shooter, he can drive a little bit and he can play defense. In college, a lot of times you get one-trick pony guys who are okay at some other things. But the guy, you have a guy, he's a shooter, and he can play a little bit of defense. But
Miller
that's
Kopp.
pretty much all he gets. Yeah.
Use him.
You've got a big guy. He's not going to be Kevin Durant stepping out on the floor draining threes. He's a big guy. That's what he does. The point guards are just point guards who sometimes can have a good scoring game. Like, it's very, and again, 90% of these guys aren't going to play professionally. Even at Indiana, they might go to Europe for a little bit, but they're not NBA level guys. And so you can't run an offense designed for NBA level guys when you don't have a team full of NBA level guys. It's that simple. Avery Johnson failed at it. Plenty of other guys have failed at it. And there have been guys that go college pro and then come back and go like, why can't I run the same stuff I was just running in the NBA? Because the players aren't the same. It's a different game with a different type of player. I've said it before. The difference between college basketball and the NBA is the difference between softball and baseball. It's a completely different game. And the concepts in some degree do translate, but the offenses, the defensive sets, you just can't run it because you don't have 6'8" guys who can knock down shots and are super athletic all across your roster. You just don't. And so it's on the coaching staff to figure that out and to change what they're doing to mold it to their roster. And that has been very slow in the first 2 years under Mike Woodson.
Yeah. And Andy, it made it especially frustrating watching Northwestern just continually find Miller Kopp and switches against Boo Buie in the second half. You knew that despite his best efforts, he's going to get cooked because that's just a bad matchup, but knowing that there aren't going to be opportunities for him on the other end to help make up for those points lost. And I do not blame Miller for that. So anyway, that is a horse that is so dead because we've been beating it for 2 years now, and I apologize, but I mean it continues to come up.
Yeah, I mean the reality is you're going to give up something if you play small, but you also have things that are going to work to your advantage. You got to find a way so that those net out in a positive way for you. He's going to fight on defense, but he's not going to be able to stay with guards. And I thought Northwestern, even when you go back to the beginning of the game and some of the comments about Geronimo, they did a good job of making IU's, lesser defenders. They put them in a position where they had to make a choice. And more often than not, they didn't make the right choice. And they didn't communicate well enough. And they basically set IU's guys up. I mean, that's ultimately what college basketball is more than anything, as we talk about differences between that and the pros. It's finding those matchups and exploiting them and finding ways to do that. And I thought IU allowed themselves to be exploited, but did not find ways to take advantage of matchups that they had on the other end. And again, I go back to how much more room did Trace have later in the game to operate when he got the ball, even on those middle ball screens. He had one nice play toward the end where Audige fouled him on the, pick and roll in the middle, because you don't have another big guy clogging the lane. I mean, how long did he play with Renew over the course of the game where there's just no room to do anything? And it just is, another thing that goes back to the coaching piece. But yeah, I thought Northwestern did a far, far better job of finding and taking advantage of matchups defensively than IU did.
Coach Tonsoni, any numbers that you would like to cite from this game?
40 minutes. Too much for Trace Jackson Davis. I know we want to win, and I know he's a super stud, and anyone who considered him, to question him the last couple nights playing through that injury, but 40 minutes is too much, period. 40 minutes when you have a strained back or whatever the issue is with his back, you got to find him 4 or 5 minutes, 2 minutes before the 12-minute timeout, something, because you're going to have him for another 2 or 3 games, and then all of a sudden something's going to rear up where, it worries me that we're overtaxing a guy who's, who's hurt. I thought he had a lot more agility and jump and explosion today than he did coming back at Iowa. So, whatever rehab he did, and just I'm thankful for TJD. I love what he's trying to do, but you could see at times he was tired. A couple of the kickouts got tipped and deflected, and missing a couple shots that he normally would hit because he's fatigued. And you have to give credit for him not wanting to come out in a situation, but again, you got to trust someone to get 4 to 6 minutes at least to give him a break or scheme something. That's a time you can run stuff for your 3-point shooters if you have them out, or change a defense up if you don't have your rim protection in there. I just don't like seeing a young man being taxed like that at any point, let alone with the injury.
Yeah,
and Logan Duncombe's given Indiana some decent minutes this year. Yeah, and this is a spot where the potential athleticism disadvantage isn't as big for him. How does he not play at all today? I don't know why.
Yeah. But Renew was okay today, not great. He played better. He can play those minutes. Give him some minutes.
Look, man, 40 minutes was a lot for me, and I was just watching it. I can't imagine what Trace was going through on the court. But no, you're right, Coach. You're just taxing your best player and wearing him down. I get there are other guys injured, and this is his senior season, and he's playing like an All-American. I mean, anybody who looks at Trace Jackson-Davis and thinks that's not an All-American is ridiculous. I mean, he's the last couple of games, even in losses. And the thing that sucks is that you've lost these 2 games and by a total of 3 points, and I think that overshadows what he's done. He's been unbelievable, and it's really
this is one of those games. I mean, I know Trace is more of a guy to lead through actions, and he hasn't always been a vocal guy. I would have loved that he would have been well within his right to just have a screaming fit at the other guys, in a timeout or at some point. And, I'm not criticizing him for not doing it. You have to be yourself, as a leader and as a player. But it's like, come on, guys. I mean, this guy is out here injured, giving you everything he's got, and it didn't feel like the other guys rose up enough to do some of those things. Andy, you're nodding. Why don't you finish this off here and take that, and then cite any other numbers that you have?
Yeah, I feel like I should come back to this because this will be a better thing to talk about than the numbers that I had flagged on here. But for the sake of continuity, I'll continue down that road. No, I thought, for an All-American type guy, this was not a game the officials lost. I thought they were bad. There were a couple of really questionable calls, but man, I mean, terrible. I don't know how you're an All-American.
Like the possession where Trace got fouled 3 straight times and they didn't call it.
Some of these calls going to the rim. I mean, my God, at least can you look out for these guys at all?
And there were at least 2 where they called
as many fouls at the beginning of the first 8 minutes of the second half as they did the whole thing. Northwestern had 4 fouls until the last minute of the game, and they were aggressive defensively.
Yeah.
And
there was the one where they called Tamar for bumping a guy on a rebound where he didn't even touch him, and there was another where the
Audi's reverse was where nobody touched him.
There was nobody touched him. Nobody touched him.
Just fantastic work by the Big Ten's finest. But yeah, I mean, I'm like you. I don't know how you can't, as a teammate, watch Trace out there gutting it out and trying to do everything he can. And I really thought, even some of his instances of trying to lead the break were sometimes better than other guys that we had leading it. And that led to a lot of his assists. I thought that was one thing that I didn't really play through him and get points. He only had 1 assist in the second half. I don't view that as a criticism of him necessarily, but I thought that was something IU was pretty effective at doing, is really playing through him in the first half. They didn't do that as much. It felt like in the second, but yeah, I mean, just a gutty performance. I think he struggled a little bit to move defensively, both I think the amount of times that he played, but also just a couple cases where you thought he might normally get a block. I just thought he couldn't do it, but he guarded some of the perimeter guys on switches pretty well in that regard. So just a really, really gutty performance from him. And disappointed that it's overshadowed by that. Now, if you want to look at absolutely terrible stats, you could talk about the 16 IU turnovers, of which 14 of them were steals. That led to 25 Northwestern points. I mean, 25-6 in points off turnovers. Northwestern shot twice as many free throws as IU and outscored IU in the paint. So you can go whichever one you want. I mean, the steals thing is just ridiculous because that's live ball turnovers that are just putting
And there were a few
an
where guys
already
didn't.
poor defensive team
were
in
a
a situation
few-
where you're having to scramble.
There were a few of those too in the first half where nobody ran back on defense.
No.
Or like they jogged. I mean, there's one where Jalen gave it up and he was standing there like waiting for somebody else to come get the ball in Indiana, and then Northwestern had two guys get to it before IU, and then Jalen just jogged back on defense. And early morning game, there's no
Here it
intensity.
goes.
No, but there's no intensity
Had to
in
get
the
it in.
building. Like just the frustration. Like I get it.
Over an hour,
And he's
so that was
a
good.
freshman. And he's a freshman. But like you make that turnover, you gotta be the first one back. Like every goddamn time, you gotta be the first one back.
The other thing those live ball turnovers do for a team that we've already said is struggling defensively in the half court, you're just exaggerating your weakness at that point. Because those aren't even normal situations. You're struggling to guard in normal situations. But giving up 25 points off of 14 turnovers, I mean, points per possession on that are
incredibly efficient.
Ungodly. I mean, you're almost at 2 points every time you turn the ball over on a turnover, almost 2 points per possession. No, that's not good math. I was using the steals number as the denominator there, but nonetheless, not good. And you're just exaggerating.
You're a math guy too.
You're exaggerating flaws that you have by just being careless with the ball. And a lot of the dribble handoffs, I mean, Northwestern's just jumping those. A lot of those were just kind of, lazy handoffs, or you got to be able to read, hey, this isn't here. I can't just try to pitch the ball to this guy.
We'll back the other way.
Aggressive and jumping those. And, I mean, not to sound like old guy in the barbershop somewhere, but like, can we get a back cut for the love of God? They're overplaying so much, on the perimeter. Like, can we one time like run some kind of 1-4 set and take advantage of that and get somebody a layup going to the basket? I mean, the answer clearly is no. But
I gotta say, guys,
never used Northwestern's aggressiveness defensively against them. A little bit got them in foul trouble as the game went on, but for the most part, did not take advantage of that whatsoever.
I gotta say, guys, I could really picture Andy sitting around with a bunch of old guys at a barbershop just complaining about Indiana basketball. Mostly Indiana football. I can see it about Indiana football a lot. In fact, I want to produce that television show. The numbers that jump out to me, Jared, are Northwestern shot 46% from the field. Indiana shot 51.6%. Northwestern shot 36.8% from the 3-point line, and Indiana shot 50% and made 2 more threes than Northwestern did, and somehow lost. Like Indiana, 40 rebounds to 32 for Northwestern. I mean, like across the board, you're looking at like these numbers. Northwestern shot 67% from the free throw line, 67.9. Indiana shot 71. The numbers Indiana needs to hit, they hit. The problem, as Andy pointed out, was the turnovers and steals and easy runouts, and the fact that Northwestern outscored Indiana in the paint by 2 is staggering. And I'll say also, Indiana 15 of 26 on layups. They missed 11 layups. And I know Northwestern has a really good 2-point defense, but still, I mean, if you have Trace Jackson Davis, you should not be missing layups. I think Trace missed 11 shots. I assume most of those missed layups are his.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ryan, one of the things I mentioned before the game, this team isn't going to be as good defensively without X and Race. Fine. We understand that. So shot volume has to become part of the formula, more part of the formula for this team to win, which means reducing turnovers, getting more offensive rebounds, and just getting more shots up than your opponent. And this plagued Indiana against Iowa. It plagued Indiana today because when they get shots on the basket, they're efficient. And they actually did a pretty good job on the glass today, but the turnovers killed them. And so Northwestern ends up taking one more field goal attempt and whatever it was, 10 more free throws. It's a big difference in the game. But that comes down to a lot of times just loose balls, taking care of the ball, giving your team a chance to have more opportunities. And Northwestern was just, even though they weren't as good at converting their opportunities, they were smarter about conserving their opportunities and at least getting shots up and giving themselves a chance. And Indiana did not. And that's how you have more talent and are more efficient offensively and still lose a basketball game. So
the turnovers were just sloppy too.
Yes.
They weren't aggressive trying to make plays. They were just flinging the ball wherever you want without looking. That's where the fundamental comment of mine. It just teams look better fundamentally than Indiana, and so more so than the loss. just the way these turnovers happened and the way the closeouts on defense happen and the lack of juice and energy for the first 10, 12 minutes. And sometimes when you have just a shocking injury, there's two ways teams can come out. Like you can come out and just be focused and crazy and go get yourself a win. That lasts maybe a game or two, and then reality hits in. Or sometimes you just feel like this team felt like they were approaching the game as, oh, man, I feel sorry about our luck. I want to win, but I just feel sorry instead of trying to take the bull by the horns and make something happen. And when they got pushed, the response was all right. They responded at times with enough effort in that, but it's a 40-minute effort, and there is a little next man up mentality. Indiana is wounded, but you either are wounded and give up, or you're wounded and fight for 40, not fight for 22 or 23, whatever we want to say. But the turnovers were sloppy. Just bad. And that, is that the offense? Is that the players not caring? Is that the coaches not instilling good habits? So probably a little bit of everything, but it's just not good fundamental basketball. And you can't win in this league with the coaches and the players in this league, regardless of what we think of programs, if you're not fundamentally sound on both ends.
Yeah, and that was everybody. Jalen and Trace, I mean, they played the most minutes, so it stands to reason they're probably going to have more turnovers. And they did. They had 9 of Indiana's 16 turnovers. A lot of Jalen's were just kind of lackadaisical, and Trace had some of those in the second half, and you can explain it with whatever you want. But at the end of the day, this just isn't a very good passing team. We haven't seen the fundamentals grow and improve, and that is one of the many reasons why we get results like this.
Yeah, there was one from Renew, but I think there was others where it's just like there's a much easier pass to make, and I forget who it was. I know it was Audige that got the deflection, but it's like just make the easy pass and get the ball going up the court where they were trying to play so fast. I think trying to maybe get down before Northwestern got their defense set up. But yeah, just some like that you worked hard, you actually got you got to stop, you got to rebound, and then you just gave the ball right back away in a situation like that, and just were too quick to relax in those situations. End of the first half, perfect example. This had nothing to do with the turnover, but you score a basket from Trace, and the Northwestern guy runs down the middle of the floor, gets a dunk. Just too quick to relax, and that lack of focus really plagued them on the turnovers, on defensive breakdowns, the whole thing. So that's another dead horse I think we've beaten at this point.
Yeah, and again, and that's stuff that the injuries don't affect that stuff. You can focus and make good fundamental plays no matter who's out there on the court. But if you have players injured and you're making fundamental mistakes, it all just compounds, and that's what happened today to Indiana. All right, coming up on the Assembly Call in our final segment, we'll hand out our Game Balls and Hoosier Hustle Award, and we'll discuss some lingering questions and look ahead to what Indiana has coming up Wednesday. That is a big game in Happy Valley for these Hoosiers. That's next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
Ethan Happ, and I never listen to the Assembly Call, especially the episodes that Ryan is on.
Thank you, Ethan. So since we all need a smile, I don't know if you guys listened to the most recent Titus and Tate podcast, but they had a segment, Mark Tatus's love for Drew Timme from Gonzaga, but when he referred to Drew Timme as Ethan Happ with a mustache,
it's a good one.
I about lost it.
I was listening to that earlier today. Yeah,
that's a good one.
Well Ethan Happ with a mustache. It was beautiful. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game and every Thursday night at our website, assemblycall.com. Make sure that you join our free IU Hoops email newsletter. It's join.assemblycall.com to get on that list. That's join.assemblycall.com. I'm Jared Morris here with the whole crew, Brian Tonsoni, Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips for breaking down Indiana's loss to Northwestern today. The final score says it was 1 point. It certainly felt like it was even worse than that. But it's time now, guys, for our Game Balls presented by our friends at Bloom Environmental, where Allie and James and the crew help folks in southern and south central Indiana maintain healthy air quality in their home or business. You can learn more at bloomenviro.com. And when you mention this ad, you get 23% off all of their testing services. That is 23 in honor of TJD. Boy, game balls after losses like this, never really a fun segment, but we did have a couple of sparkling individual performances, I suppose you could say. Coach, would you like to give out what a terrible adjective. We had some decent performances, but you lose. I don't think sparkling. I don't know. I don't know.
I can
Whatever.
see some
I need to
dirt
go
on
back
those
to
things,
bed.
Jared.
It's just a bad word to choose. Coach, the sparkling Coach Tonsoni. There, it works much better there. Why don't you give us your game ball?
That's just weak. We expect more from you, Morris.
Hey, Jared, can you take that? That's just weak drop. We're gonna need that one.
My adjective just got stolen. Okay.
Saying that.
It's got to be Trace Jackson Davis. Hood Shafino scored a lot of points. A little loose with the ball to get a game ball. I just really appreciate Trace gutting it out with his injury and playing the 40 minutes. He wasn't perfect today, but I'm going to go with TJD.
Okay, Ryan.
Same, going with TJD. 18 points, 24 rebounds, 8 assists. If his teammates had made a couple shots, he'd had another triple-double, but 4 blocks as well, and he played all 40 minutes. I don't know how you could pick anybody else given that result. Jalen Chifino made some shots, played really well, but Trace was the heart and soul of this team yet again and tried to will them to victory, and nobody else came along for the ride, it didn't feel like. So it's Trace for me.
Andy?
Yep, same here. Anytime you get mentioned as the first guy in IU basketball do something since Kent Benson, which was the thing on rebounds, you did something pretty good. So I'll go with Trace.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Trace too. Again, the one guy that really seemed to kind of bring some focus and effort the entire time he was out there, and he was out there the whole time. So I'm going to give it to Trace as well. I saw a little discussion going on in the chat mob. Someone said there was a lot of lazy, lackadaisical basketball out there. And I saw Jen say, are they lazy or are they just honestly lost or confused out there? And I think it's a really good question because I think there are times, defensively, during, some of the things that they're running offensively where, there is, maybe a lack of movement or it looks like it may be, kind of laziness, but it is confusion. But the disappointing thing to me is I did see today what felt like some just lazy and lackadaisicalness. Getting back in transition, there's never confusion about getting back in transition. You run as hard as you can to the other end of the floor, pick up the ball, and, take care of your assignments from there. And we saw too many opportunities where that didn't happen. Attacking a rebound that is bouncing around you. There's not a whole lot of thought that needs to go into that. It's just go get the dang ball. And that's the problem, Coach, to answer that question. I do think there are times for a team that is maybe struggling with the system or understanding what they're supposed to be doing. You can see some indecision that feels like it's guys not playing hard, and that's not it. I think the problem today and the reason why a lot of fans are frustrated today is there was some of that kind of lackadaisicalness. Now, that can come because you just feel beaten down by the circumstance and maybe you're not believing in what's going on, frustration, all of that, but you can't have it. And that's the problem because if that starts to snowball, this team is going to have no chance to win games. That's the problem, I think, with some of what we saw today.
No, I think Jen's on to something, to be honest. I do think this team felt sorry for themselves, and that's on the players. Anytime you lace it up, no matter what jersey you're wearing, you got to go out and play basketball the right way. And I think they were not into the game for whether it's the noon start or they lost a starter or maybe they're not liking what's going on. If you only get so many times to play, and you should play, as fully involved and invested as possible. So I do see what you're saying, Jared, too. But there could be a lot there where, the habits haven't been coached out of these guys either. So we don't know all of that. But to blame just the players on this is, I'm with Ryan. They need to be better and hold each other accountable, and someone needs to grab them and yell. Absolutely. And players can overcome a tough situation, but the bad habits have not been coached out of this program. And sometimes you can't, and that's a player issue. But I think it's more than just a player issue with Indiana. I think it's a combination a little bit, and I'm leaning more towards the coaching staff than I am the players. And sometimes when you're lost offensively or you don't buy into what the coach is selling or doing, then it gets hard to be as motivated as you should be. And so I think Jen's on to something. And, again, it's hard for us to sit here in the man cave and really put our finger on it. without being in there. But it's a combination of both of those things, I believe.
Well, the one thing you know is it's a symptom of something deeper. That's for sure.
Yes.
And whatever it is, it's not good. All right, next up, ironically, the Hoosier Hustle Award.
The Hoosier Real Hustle Award.
Hi, this is Anthony Leal, reminding you to check out our friends at Evansville Security Services. Based in the hometown of IU legend Calvert Chaney, Evansville Security Services has been providing off-duty police officers to businesses and individuals since 2001. In other words, they're in the business of prevention and peace of mind. And remember, prevention cannot be measured. To learn more about how Evansville Security Services can help you preserve your peace of mind by preventing bad outcomes, visit evansvillesecurityservices.com. That's evansvillesecurityservices.com.
All right, thank you, Anthony. Let's go Hoosier Hustle Award. Ryan, why don't you lead us off?
I mean, this is a real tough one today because Jalen Jafino played 35 minutes. I wasn't sure. I loved his focus and hustle for a lot of the game on the defensive end. I thought offensively he did pretty darn well. But the one guy I saw giving consistent effort the entire game, and even though it wasn't always perfectly directed, was Trey Galloway. And I thought he really played very, very hard. And I thought that in some ways we saw Jalen not play super hard. And again, I think with Jalen, you know, I'm not saying this was a lack of, you know, I'm just not going to play hard or, you know, a mental thing or anything like that. He also played an insane amount of minutes against Iowa for a freshman with a heavy load on his shoulders, being the primary point guard. Had to do the same thing today. He's got to be a little worn down. So I don't necessarily think this was a attitude problem or anything like that. I think he's just kind of worn out. But I would give it to Trey Galloway and just as the proof for Trey. And I think that he, you know, is trying to do a little too much when he's on the floor right now. I think teams are expecting him to drive in and do those kind of crazy passes, and he's getting some stolen over the last couple games and everything. But 25 minutes, they were plus 14 when he was on the floor. He was on the floor when they were at their best, and I thought he worked really hard. I thought especially his defense really late picked up really well. So I'm giving it to Trey.
Yeah, and there was a great sequence back in the second half when it was 55-41, and Indiana didn't play a whole lot of great defense, but they did on this possession. And you'll recall it's the one where they ended up forcing Audige to, you know, take that three late in the shot clock, and Trey was just all over him. And then comes down on offense and, you know, got into the lane, and you kind of feared that he was going to maybe overpass it and try and dump to Trace, and he hit that little floater. It was really nice. I agree with you. He, to me, was kind of the one guy all game that I thought was just really busting it on both ends. So Trey gets it for me, Coach.
Let's just go with Trey. I mean, that's kind of hard on a game like this when you have the outcome. But I do. He hit the floor a few times. I thought the other one you could consider is C.J. Gunn. I just thought he played with some intensity. He didn't get a lot of run, and I don't think he impacted an awful lot, but I thought I liked his body language when he was in the game, so that would be the other one to consider, but I'll go with Trey.
Andy?
Yeah, I was going to say C.J. Gunn. I thought he sparked what comeback they did make in the first half, just by being a guy who, like I said earlier, he wasn't afraid to get up into them defensively, wasn't afraid to attack a little bit when IU had the ball. So I'll give it to him, knowing that Trey will get it for the game, but I thought he was definitely worthy of consideration.
Yeah, and Ryan, I think you bring up good points about Jalen. You know, we maybe have been a little bit harsh on him in this show than we should have after a game where he scores 33 points, and you know we know that he's dealing with some back issues too. And I do think there were a couple of those instances that really stood out with him, maybe not giving a lot of hustle, but Jalen's a freshman, and you're going to deal with some ups and downs from kind of a focus standpoint with a freshman. The issue is now with this team as it is, with no X. No race. I mean, you need Jalen to basically play like a grizzled veteran senior.
Yeah.
And
it's a lot to ask.
It is.
Even though I think he's going to be a first round pick, and I think he's going to be playing in the NBA next year. It's a lot to ask.
Yeah. So I want to make sure that we're fair to him, because from an offensive standpoint, what he did today was phenomenal. I mean, the shot making that he showed is some of the best shot making we've seen in this program in a long time. Now, is that translatable? I don't know. There were big questions about his shot making, but now he just keeps making shots. And so, he's not going to score 33 points every game, obviously, but he had to carry a really big load offensively based on how Indiana's playing. And his ability to do that and hit a lot of clutch shots to keep this team at least within arm's length was impressive. So for some of the things I think that, are maybe fair to criticize him for, he obviously was a big part of the reason why Indiana was even competitive today. And that obviously is a lot. The thing, Andy, that I started thinking about, and I guess this is our lingering question. We've been here before with a terrifically talented perimeter player offensively, a senior down low, who can really do some good work when we had Romeo and Juwan. And boy, this season is starting to feel a little bit more like that season than I ever thought it would here in January. And that's a lingering question, is we saw what happened that year, which is things just snowballed so far out of control before they could yank things back onto the road. It was ridiculous. And, losing 2 games is not losing 12 out of 13 like that team did. But we've been there. We've seen the warning signs. There are a whole lot of those warning signs right now. And so can this team go on the road at Penn State, against a good team in a tough environment and yank this thing back on the road with a victory? Because if not, in this conference this year, things can snowball really quickly. And you run the risk of wasting a season with 2, just terrifically talented guys in Jalen and Trace. But we've been here before, and we've seen it, and it felt a lot like this.
Worth remembering, Jared, a lot of these guys aren't going to be here next year because they're exhausting eligibility or they're going to go to the NBA. This is your year to make a big impact, because it's not like there's a whole range of 5-star recruits coming in next year for Indiana. This was the year of Mike Woodson's early tenure that they had to make hay, and it's not looking great. And so I think that's what a lot of people are looking at right now is, all right, well, if you can't do it with these guys, what do we have to look forward to? And so this is a very important season for Indiana basketball, and certainly for Mike Woodson in his tenure.
And it's still early. There's still plenty of time to get this thing turned around,
16 games left, something like that. There's plenty of time, but
there's warning signs flashing. Yeah. Bright red.
It's not getting better.
Yeah, I think what we talk about with Jalen, underscores a different reason for why losing X is such a big deal. You can afford, when you have both of those guys, for one to maybe take a little bit of a backseat defensively, knowing that you've got his playmaking ability. Like, the burden on Jalen Hood-Schifino without Xavier Johnson right now is massive. And he's picked that up and then some on the offensive end, talked about how well he controlled the game against Iowa. And the shot making, as you mentioned today, was great. I don't think he is probably ready to take on the burden of having to defend both the best perimeter player on the other team and be the guy who's running the show. But that's what he's being asked to do right now. And that's where other guys stepping up defensively becomes really important. Can Tamar Bates take that step? He struggled at times today. He didn't play for a long stretch in the first half. CJ Gunn showed some things. Galloway showed some stretches of that, but also got beat at times. So I think they've got to find ways to kind of allocate that workload of, everything you expected Xavier Johnson and Jalen Hood-Schifino to do as a tandem can't all fall on Jalen Hood-Schifino, which is pretty much what's happening right now. So you got to allocate some of the things that you expected from X, knowing that you're going to get some percentage of it to other players, and they have to be able to step up. And I think that's why when we look at the common thread of these last 2 games, it's like, man, we had 2 guys play really, really good. And the drop off from those 2 guys to whoever you think the third best guy was is massive. And they have to find a way to close that gap a little bit. And it doesn't have to be the same player every night. Doesn't have to be the same player every week. Doesn't even have to be the same player every half. But you need somebody to be able to take a little bit of the pressure off of those guys. And that's really what you have to look for as you move forward. The challenge as you look at, playing a Penn State team that, we remarked last year just what Shrewsbury had been able to do schematically on the offensive side. If you think he's not going to come out with ways to try to isolate the guys that that they want in disadvantages, you're kidding yourself. So this team has to get a lot better and a lot more mature defensively in a matter of days in order to play well in that game, because they will be tested defensively in an even greater way than they were today. And that's what gives you cause for concern. Again, the offense, we can talk about things that we don't like about it, but the net result of what the offense put up today against a really good defensive team was more than adequate to win the game. I mean, you scored 174 points, I think, in the last 2 games, and you haven't won either one of them. That's pretty damning in terms of what your defense is really accomplishing at that point. And you're not going into you're going into a matchup where that's going to be exploited. So that's ultimately the lingering concern when you look at it that way.
Yep.
Just another ray of sunshine to fire into the show today.
All right. Remember to check out our friends at Home Field Apparel, homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code HOME at checkout to get 15% off your first order. Gentlemen, time for last call. Ryan, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I just think what we've seen from Indiana is this is a talented team. It's got some depth, and even with the injuries, should be enough to beat half the Big Ten. I don't think it's a very well-coached team, and I think that we're seeing that sort of play out repeatedly. I don't think this staff is very flexible. I don't think they're willing to change things that aren't working. I think they keep drilling it because I think their insistence is, well, it's because the players aren't executing properly. Well, if the players are consistently not executing what you're putting out there properly, maybe change what you're doing and make it easier on them. So I think Mike Woodson's at sort of an inflection point right now. He needs to figure out what kind of college coach he wants to be. Is he going to be a guy who, sticks to his guns consistently and demands that, the stuff that he is putting out there works until it does work or the team fails? Or is he willing to adjust to his personnel, adjust to these college kids, and try and find things that do work for this roster? That's really the big question of Indiana basketball. It's going to define the next couple years, really, and it's going to start right now. And you're going to see it at Penn State. This defense has been an absolute disaster for weeks. If there is no change against Penn State, I think it's time to start, asking some questions of this program.
Andy?
I mean, I don't know that there's a whole lot to say that we haven't said already in an hour and a half or whatever it's really been. But a really disappointing start to the game today in what was really an important bounce back spot for this team. I think everybody at this point has reset some expectations in terms of where this team sits. I think we've talked about that a lot. But I think no matter what your lowered expectations were, I think being able to come out with a little more urgency in a home game against a team that has been surprising, but still is not among the top in the league from a talent perspective, was just really, really disappointing. And, these 2 games this week have been one game you got off to a great start, found a way to lose. The other game you got off to a terrible start, found a way to lose. Again, to me, it ties back to the defense. You're playing well enough offensively, even with players missing, to be able to win games if you can show just a little bit of improvement and things like that on the defensive end. They just have to take a massive step forward there, and they haven't shown signs of doing it. And if the answer after the game is, well, these guys are hurt, as you said, I'm not sure what to tell you. But somebody has to step up and make some changes from that perspective, whether that's players in terms of the way they're leading. I know Trace talked about that. Sounds like in the press conference of saying, I need to do a better job of leading the team based on how they executed the game plan, different things like that. But something has to change because things will not get easier. The Big Ten is beating up on itself. But things do not get easier. You go, Penn State's really good offensively. Wisconsin, team IU struggled with. You got Illinois after that, and they kind of bounced back a little bit yesterday and played well. Like, you're not going to get probably an easier game than the one that you had today. So, I feel like we said this so many times over the years. It's how does this team respond to this scenario? The response from the Iowa game to this one was not good. You got to hope that they can respond a little bit differently going from this game to the Penn State game to give themselves a chance to meet even the lowered expectations that I think everybody has at this point, which is disappointing enough.
Well said, Andy. Good luck in your game today.
We will need it. Thanks, see you guys.
All right. See you, man. Coach, last call.
Yeah, I just want to see. I'm calling it a rebuilding year, a developmental year. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but teams that lose 2 starters, they struggle. Michigan State had Adkins down and Hall down and lost to this Northwestern team at home. Kind of familiar, right? Creighton loses their center and had some other injuries and loses 6 in a row, and that team did really well out in Maui. So, to be honest, when you lose 2 6-year senior starters, the expectations to win have to be tempered, and I think we need to do that. And that doesn't excuse style or how you play or the fundamentals. That's the only concern of mine. Not so much the loss today is in the how, and people could disagree with me, and I could be totally wrong. When you have 2 studs like we have, maybe you should still compete. But when you lose, your whole season was built upon having those guys there. It may take some time for the coaching staff, the players, everyone to get the right feel, the right mental fit. Again, it doesn't make what we saw today, Jared, acceptable or fun. But there's some realism in how you handle losses in college basketball. And I think Indiana's in for a tough run, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is reminiscent of Romeo's year, where you have the talent, but a lot of the things just don't. You had a Finney injury there that year, I believe, if I remember right.
Yep.
And as much as we want to say next man up, if the next man up was capable of playing above and better than the starter, they would have been starting for the most part, and we just lost a lot. With that, I don't want to excuse the poor play, so it's a little bit of a seesaw conundrum, whatever you want to call it, about how to evaluate Indiana basketball right now. But the lack of fundamentals is the most concerning to me. Like, I thought we were losing them before we had the injuries. I thought there were some issues defensively and offensively before the rash of injuries, but we have been really hit hard. Hood Schifino's out for a couple of the games that we lost. And then we lose X inside a game, and then we lose Race inside a game. And now we have 2 days to recover from that. And the guys were just kind of beat up mentally, and doesn't excuse it. But I think we're in for a long, long season. It's not going to stop my love of the Hoosiers, showing up and doing the show, the love of the community, and talking and sharing. We're going to need each other more and more now, because I just – if we win it at Penn State, it'll be great. But the expectations are not to win. Probably a couple, 2-3 more times until we get into a place where we can play without those guys, or maybe get someone back, if that is all possible. And so there we need C.J. Gunn to play. We might need to see Caleb Banks play, because you can still benefit from this struggle. Every setback is an opportunity to get better in life, right? Like, adversity gives you opportunity. We have an opportunity to develop people in game time situations, live with their mistakes, understand, teach them on film, because we don't want these losses now to hurt us again next year when you have a whole new roster. You want to have some continuity, and you can get that now. And I know that's like giving up on the season. I'm not giving up. You still going to play to win, but find 10 minutes here or there, find 15 minutes here or there. Try to fit them into a winning situation. Because you have no choice. It's just going to be a struggle, and I think we all need to be ready for that, and it doesn't mean we can't hold them to high standards.
Yeah. No, it is. These are the seasons that are the toughest, Coach, because you have these injuries, and you have to readjust to the injuries. There's just expecting this team to be everything that we thought without X and Race. That's just not going to be possible. And I think the challenge with evaluating today's game, it was like, okay, there was a certain expectation, a certain revised expectation for how Indiana would do without X and Race, and it still viscerally felt like they fell short of that.
I agree.
And look, again, it's college kids and the emotion of college sports. It's up and down from one game to the next, and that can be difficult. And there's probably a whole mix of stuff in the stew that is causing some of the things that we saw out there on the court. And so I think it's okay to acknowledge all of that stuff while still trying to hold them accountable to a certain standard, and that standard, wasn't met today. But the other thing to remember and to keep in mind, and we hyper-focus so much on these bad moments, look at where Iowa basketball was a week ago. They've lost 3 or 4 in a row. They lost to Eastern Illinois. They've got a player stepping away, to take care of his mental health. I mean, it's just everything is pointing down. And, they, put together an inspired effort against Indiana to come back. And now today, didn't they go on the road and win at Rutgers today? Noted tough team Iowa goes on the road and beats Rutgers. And now things are looking up for them. And so this is what happens in this league is as soon as things feel like they're at their worst, if you can come together and have a few things go your way, you can come out of it in a positive way. And so that's the hope that I'm, taking from this is, there were some positives to take from today in terms of the individual, performances, and individual abilities to score in tough situations against a tough defense. It wasn't all for naught. But, can this team now kind of find itself together and, despite the injuries and despite who's not there, make the most of the guys who are? Today they weren't able to do that, but, you're 40 minutes away from doing it and getting a completely renewed, kind of vision of what this season can be. You go on the road and win at Penn State, you're feeling good. You come home for a home game against a Wisconsin team that you've struggled against, but you're still going to have as much or more talent than them, just raw talent. Come back and beat them at home, and you're back at 3-3, and things are feeling okay. Now, that is much, much easier said than done. I'm not saying I expect it, but what I'm saying is in the Big Ten, you see that happen. And so we, as fans, I think, just have to stay the course, keep supporting, keep analyzing, keep critiquing, but keep supporting, and know that within that locker room, they still have what it takes to turn this thing around. Will they? It's an open question. I think it's fair to doubt and to be skeptical about it. But it's right there, and you can turn it around, and momentum in this league is 1 week at a time. And so Indiana has an opportunity. They're behind the 8 ball. You don't want to be in this position because, you're staring down the barrel of 1-4 in the conference with a tough road game. But if you can go find a way to win that, you can get things turned back around. And that's just what this team has to do right now. So I don't necessarily offer that as an offering of hope that it's going to happen. But that's what's at stake, and we'll be here watching it and hoping that this team can find something within itself to get a win that, unfortunately, they just were not able to get today. All right. Well, thank you for being here. That's going to do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. And don't forget to go to join.assemblycall.com to join our free email newsletter. Special thank you to Bob Thompson for the music you hear on the show, and special thank you to John Ringer of rigdesign.com for designing our logo. And thank you, as always, for listening. We'll be back on Wednesday night after IU Penn State and listen to the Doing the Work crew after Indiana-Northwestern, the women's game coming up here soon. Until then.
Take it from me, Roman Langford. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
All right.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
Here I come. This is Stan Sony.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody, for being here. Gosh. That was tough, Coach. That was tough.
Yeah, it's just in a month's time, things just dropped off.
Did we lose Coach?
Nope, I'm still here.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I couldn't.
Yeah.
Something was choppy, whatever.
No, I said in a month's time, we've just kind of gone from high expectations. You win at the 1st of December, November 30th against North Carolina, and you have your whole roster, and then Hood Schifino gets hurt, and then X gets hurt, and then Race gets hurt, and then the guys you have left decide not to play fundamental basketball or aren't coached in a certain way to play fundamental basketball. The train just ran off the tracks fast, and I don't know how to get it back if we're going to get it back. I don't have a good feeling. Again, I don't want to be pessimistic, but it just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't.
No, I mean, if this team fights and scratches and claws, but they just have a bad shooting night and Northwestern comes in and beats you, it's like, all right, you know what, man? This team, they tried their damnedest, missing 2 of their guys. Northwestern has beaten some teams. And I don't know. I mean, maybe we had a different read on the game than what we should have, but that's just not how it felt. Didn't feel like that watching it. Northwestern just kind of came in and threw the first punch and, felt like they controlled the game by 10 points the whole way, and I don't know. Just it felt like there was more there, even with all the other issues. But I guess we'll find out. It's going to play out over the season. See
Yeah,
what these
I
guys are
mean,
made
it's
of.
just tough. Like Minnesota, where's the break? Where's the get right? There isn't. The get right's inside the staff, inside the players, to try to find a way to, to get a win. But I don't know what to expect because I still think we have talent on this team. It's not like,
we have guys who can make plays.
You got two guys that can really make plays. So I think it's fair to expect some better play. But yet it's not the complete team that you had. And any coach will tell you when you plan the off season, you plan for X to be there all the time and race to be there all the time. That's where the concern with me is in the adjustments. If you have to have those guys in your system, the way you run things to win, and then you lose, then maybe you're not capable of getting guys to play up to the level that you need to win. That's what I'm going to be watching, right? Because it's all about adaptations. But there's been tons of, our high school, our Western program, we had 3 post players out. We have 3 post players on the roster. I'm not coaching anymore, but they lost 3 in a row. They've won 5 in a row since they got all 3 of their guys back. So
makes a difference.
It honestly, it makes a difference, to be fair. I just think there's some underlying, something's going on because the juice is not there that we saw at Xavier, that we saw at the North Carolina game. Something – player-wise, coach-wise, they just don't look like it's fun or they're enjoying what they're doing. And that's why I think Jen was on to something. Like, there's a bigger issue than just throwing the ball loosely. There's a bigger issue than, not closing out right. There's a bigger issue going on right now, and I have no clue what it is, but it's not, you hope you have an Iowa turnaround. You hope you have a Michigan State turnaround. But because of that underlying factor that's just out there where it doesn't, I don't know. I didn't see Iowa when they lost 3 in a row. So I don't know what their mojo was. Were they down and out? Were they lackadaisical? Did they make some bad turnovers? And then all of a sudden they started playing well. I don't know.
No, and look, and for all of our hemming and hawing and trying to explain it away, look no further than the women's team. Terry Morin planned all offseason for Grace Berger to be there, and she went out and they weren't as good, obviously, and they lost a game they probably wouldn't have lost if Grace had been playing, but it still felt the same, and that's the issue. Is it just, and to be fair, it wasn't feeling right even when X and Race were there, and that's the other part of the issue. Is it's like there are the injuries, but man, things felt a little weird even before that. So it's just, I don't know, it's a weird aggregation of things that have happened the last month that here we are on January 8th, and at the end of an Indiana-Northwestern game at home, there was talk of contending for a Big Ten title, and it was about Northwestern. I mean, what a weird season, man. Anyway, I don't know. Nothing else to say, really. Take a few days to decompress from this one and come back after Penn State. Coach can spend 60 minutes talking about Micah Shrewsbury.
I hope he has an off night.
Yeah. Let's hope. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Good night,
Coach,
everyone.
Thanks for being here. We'll see you guys all later.